The first time I actually saw him, I almost missed him, which is exactly what people like him count on. Not being invisible, just forgettable. The kind of face your brain throws away 5 minutes later. Average height, gray baseball cap, dark jacket, nothing remarkable, nothing memorable. A man designed to disappear into a crowd. I spotted him on a Wednesday night. My shift had ended later than usual. The downtown streets were nearly empty. A cold wind moved through the concrete corridors between buildings, carrying scraps of paper across the sidewalk. I stepped outside with my purse tucked under my arm and immediately saw Marcus waiting across the street. Same sedan, same headlights, same calm presence. But before I crossed toward him, something caught my attention. A reflection. A figure standing beside a newspaper box half a block away, watching. Not staring directly, watching indirectly, the way people do when they don't want to be noticed. The moment our eyes almost met, he looked away, too quickly, like he'd practiced it. A chill slid down my spine. By the time I reached Marcus's car, the man was gone. I didn't mention it, at least not right away, because I wasn't even sure what I'd seen. Fear plays tricks on lonely people, or at least that's what I kept telling myself. The ride home was quiet. Rain tapped softly against the roof. Traffic lights reflected across the wet pavement. For several blocks, neither of us spoke. Then Marcus said something unexpected. "You see him tonight?" My head snapped toward him. The steering wheel remained steady beneath his hands. His eyes stayed on the road. But I knew exactly who he meant. My stomach tightened. "You saw him too?" Marcus didn't answer immediately. That worried me. Finally, he nodded. "Third time this week." The air inside the car suddenly felt colder. "What do you mean, third time?" He exhaled slowly. "The guy near your building." I felt my pulse begin to climb. "You've seen him before?" "Yeah." "When?" "Monday." A pause. Then Tuesday. The city lights blurred past outside. I stared at him. "Why didn't you tell me?" Marcus gripped the wheel tighter. "Because I wasn't sure." That answer irritated me. "Sure of what?" His jaw tightened. "Whether he was watching you." Silence. Then he added quietly, "Now I'm sure." I turned toward the window, trying to steady my breathing, trying to convince myself there was a logical explanation. There always had to be one, didn't there? But deep down, something felt wrong, very wrong. And it wasn't just the man, it was everything. The note, the missing file, Nancy's reaction, the strange conversations, the feeling that invisible pieces were slowly connecting behind my back. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The house felt unusually quiet, heavy, the way buildings sometimes feel before a storm. I made coffee, opened the curtains, and froze. A car sat across the street, dark sedan, engine off, windows tinted, the same vehicle Marcus had mentioned weeks earlier. For several seconds, I stood completely still, the mug warming my hands, my heartbeat loud in my ears. Then the car started, slowly pulled away, and disappeared around the corner. I wasn't imagining things anymore. Someone was there. Someone had been there watching. A few hours later, I called Marcus. It was the first time I'd ever contacted him outside a ride. He answered immediately. "You okay?" No hello, no greeting, just that. "You okay?" I stared out my kitchen window. "No." A long pause. Then, "What happened?" I told him about the car, every detail. When he finished, he was silent, dangerously silent. Finally, he said, "I'm coming by." "What?" "I'm coming over." "You don't need to." "Yes." The firmness in his voice surprised me. An hour later, his sedan rolled into my driveway. For the first time, seeing him felt less like seeing a driver and more like seeing an ally, someone standing between me and something I didn't understand. Marcus walked around the property slowly, examining everything: gate, windows, garage, fence line. Nothing dramatic, nothing obvious, yet his expression grew darker with every step. Finally, he stopped beside my mailbox. "What?" He pointed. Tiny scratches, barely visible, near the lock. My stomach dropped. Someone opened it. The words landed heavily because suddenly the anonymous note made sense. Whoever left it hadn't dropped it there casually. They'd accessed the mailbox intentionally, methodically. Marcus crouched beside the post, studying the ground. Then he stood and said something that changed everything. "I need to tell you something." His voice sounded different, heavier, like he'd been carrying something for years. We sat on my porch, the afternoon sky turning gray overhead. For several moments he said nothing, just stared toward the street. Then finally, "I wasn't always a driver." I waited. Marcus rubbed his hands together slowly. "My daughter died 12 years ago." The words hit me like cold water. I stared at him. He rarely talked about himself, never like this. "She was 22. His voice remained steady, too steady, the kind of control people learn after years of grief. "There was a guy following her." My chest tightened. Marcus looked toward the road, not at me. "She told me twice." Silence. Wind moved through the trees. "I told her she was probably imagining it." The words sounded painful to say, like broken glass. His eyes never left the street. 3 weeks later, she disappeared. My throat tightened. "Oh, God!" Marcus swallowed. "They found her 5 days later." The silence afterwards felt endless. I didn't know what to say. Nothing seemed adequate. Nothing ever is. Finally, he looked at me. For the first time since I'd met him, I saw the wound he'd been carrying all along. Raw, permanent, hidden beneath years of composure. I ignored the signs. His voice cracked slightly. I promised myself I'd never do that again. Suddenly, everything made sense. The observations, the vigilance, the way he noticed details other people ignored, the way he watched mirrors, the way he remembered license plates. He wasn't paranoid. He was experienced, painfully experienced. And he recognized patterns. Patterns he wished he'd recognized years earlier. I felt tears burn behind my eyes, not for myself, for him. For the guilt he'd clearly carried for over a decade. Marcus stood, straightened his jacket, then looked directly at me. "Someone's paying attention to you." No hesitation, no uncertainty, no doubt, just truth. The certainty in his voice frightened me because Marcus wasn't guessing anymore. He knew. And if he knew, then whoever was watching had already made a mistake. They'd become visible. The following Friday, everything escalated. At work, Nancy called me into her office again. This time, she locked the door, closed the blinds, and handed me a folder. No explanation, no greeting, just a folder. Inside were copies of transaction records, case files, settlement numbers, account transfers, dozens of pages. My eyes widened. What is this? Nancy sat down slowly, like the weight of the answer exhausted her. It's what somebody's been hiding. A chill moved through me. The room suddenly felt smaller. What am I looking at? Nancy rubbed her temples, then whispered, "Millions of dollars." My heart stopped, and what she said next made every strange thing from the past month feel connected. Every note, every missing file, every suspicious car, every shadow standing outside my house, because according to Nancy, someone inside the system had been stealing settlement money from elderly victims for years, and the records proving it were disappearing one file at a time. I stared at the folder, hands trembling, mind racing. Then I looked up. Nancy? Her face was pale, terrified. What happens if they know we found this? She didn't answer immediately. The silence itself became the answer. Outside her office, phones rang, printers hummed, people walked past unaware, normal life continuing. Yet inside that room, everything had changed. Because for the first time, I wasn't just being watched. I finally understood why. And somewhere beyond those office walls, someone else was beginning to realize that I was getting closer to the truth, closer than I should be, closer than they could afford. And 3 nights later, Marcus would miss my exit, not by accident, not because he was distracted, but because he'd finally seen something that confirmed his worst fear, something waiting near my house, something that should never have been there. The night Marcus missed my exit, I knew something was wrong before he said a single word. It was one of those Los Angeles nights that felt strangely empty. No sirens, no helicopters, no distant music drifting through apartment windows, just rain. A slow, steady rain that turned the city into a reflection of itself. The kind of night where shadows looked deeper than they should. My shift had ended late. Nancy and I spent nearly 3 hours reviewing documents, cross-checking settlement accounts, tracing transfers, following money. And every page seemed worse than the one before. The fraud wasn't small. It wasn't isolated. It wasn't one greedy employee skimming funds. It was organized, careful, years old. Someone had been stealing money intended for vulnerable people, widows, disabled workers, retirees, immigrants who barely understood the paperwork they signed, people unlikely to hire lawyers, people unlikely to fight back. Millions of dollars gone, hidden inside hundreds of tiny adjustments, tiny changes nobody would notice unless they examined everything. And now, Nancy and I had started doing exactly that. When I stepped outside just before midnight, Marcus was waiting. Same spot, same sedan, same tired eyes, but something about him felt different. The moment I opened the passenger door, I noticed it. His expression, tight, focused, like a man trying to solve a problem while driving through it. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded, too quickly. A lie. I buckled my seatbelt, handed him his tea. He thanked me, but didn't drink it. That alone was unusual. Marcus never skipped the tea, not once. The engine hummed, rain tapped across the windshield, and we pulled away from the curb. For several blocks, neither of us spoke. Downtown faded behind us, street lights reflected across wet pavement. Everything looked normal, until it wasn't. Because when we reached Cedar Avenue, the turn that always led toward my neighborhood, Marcus kept driving, straight ahead. I frowned. At first, I thought he simply missed it. Then one block passed, then another, then another. My stomach tightened. "Marcus?" No answer. "Marcus, you missed the turn." His hands remained locked on the wheel, 10 and 2, exactly the way they had been when he told me about his daughter, the way they became when he was scared. The realization hit me immediately. This wasn't a mistake. Something was wrong, very wrong. "Marcus," my voice came out softer this time. "What happened?" Silence, a long silence. Then he spoke, and every hair on my arm stood up. "I need you to stay calm." The city suddenly felt very far away. My pulse quickened. "You're scaring me." "I know. He swallowed. "I'm sorry." Rain streaked across the glass. Traffic lights blurred into red smears. The car continued moving away from home, away from safety, away from everything familiar. Finally, he exhaled, then said the sentence that changed everything. "I drove past your house before picking you up." I stared at him. "What?" I wanted to check something. The knot in my stomach tightened. "What did you see?" For several seconds, he didn't answer. Then, "The man from outside your building." The world seemed to stop. "No." Marcus nodded once, slowly. "Yes." My mouth went dry. "No." Marcus nodded once, slowly. "Yes." My mouth went dry. "No." Marcus nodded once, slowly. "Yes." My mouth went dry. "No." Marcus nodded once, slowly. "Yes." My mouth went dry. "No." Marcus nodded once, slowly. "Yes." My mouth went dry. "No." Marcus nodded once, slowly. "Yes." My mouth went dry. "No." Marcus nodded once, slowly. "Yes." My mouth went dry. "No." Marcus nodded once, slowly. "Yes." My mouth went dry. "No." Marcus nodded once, slowly. "Yes." My mouth went dry. "No." Marcus nodded once, slowly. "Yes." My mouth went dry. "No." Marcus nodded once, slowly. "Yes." My mouth went dry. "No." Marcus nodded once, slowly. "Yes." My mouth went dry. "No." Marcus nodded once, slowly. "Yes." My mouth went dry. "No." Marcus nodded once, slowly. "Yes." My mouth went dry. "No." Marcus nodded once, slowly. "Yes." My mouth went dry. "No." Marcus nodded once, slowly. "Yes." My mouth went dry. "No." Marcus nodded once, slowly. "Yes." My mouth went dry. "No." Marcus nodded once, slowly. "Yes." My mouth went dry. "No." Marcus nodded once, slowly. "Yes." My mouth went dry. "No." Marcus nodded once, slowly. "Yes." My mouth went dry. "No." Marcus nodded once, slowly. "Yes." My mouth went dry. "No." Marcus nodded once, slowly. "Yes." My mouth went dry. "No." Marcus nodded once, slowly. "Yes." My mouth went dry. "No." Marcus nodded once, slowly. "Yes." My mouth went dry. "No." Marcus nodded once, slowly. "Yes." My mouth. Trying not to imagine a stranger standing outside my house while I worked, Marcus continued. I parked half a block away. Every word felt deliberate, measured, like he had replayed the memory 100 times already. He stayed there almost 15 minutes. My hands began trembling. Then Marcus said something that made my blood run cold. He had a camera. The air left my lungs. A camera, not binoculars, not a phone, a camera. Someone wasn't casually watching. Someone was documenting, recording, tracking, collecting information. The difference mattered a lot. What kind of camera? A professional one. The answer came immediately. No hesitation, no uncertainty. Marcus was sure. I stared out the side window, rain racing across the glass, the city lights stretching into long, blurred lines. Everything suddenly felt unreal, like I had stepped into somebody else's nightmare. What happened after that? Marcus tightened his grip on the steering wheel. He wasn't alone. I turned sharply toward him. What? His jaw flexed. There was another guy. My stomach dropped. Another one. This wasn't one man anymore. This wasn't random curiosity. This wasn't coincidence. This was planning, organization, coordination. And suddenly, Nancy's files felt far more dangerous. Marcus continued. The second guy showed up about 10 minutes later. I could barely breathe. What did they do? They talked. My voice came out as a whisper. Could you hear them? No. A pause. But I watched them. The silence stretched. Then, they pointed at your house. My heart sank. Marcus glanced at me briefly, only a second, but I saw something in his eyes. Fear. Real fear. The kind that comes from experience. The kind that recognizes danger before other people see it. And then he delivered the final piece, the piece that convinced him not to take me home. He tried your gate. The world tilted. I stared at him, unable to speak, unable to think, unable to process. What? Marcus's voice lowered. They walked to your gate. My pulse roared in my ears. They checked the lock. The car seemed smaller, the air thinner, everything narrowing. They weren't looking at your house anymore, Evelyn. A pause. Then, they were figuring out how to get inside. The words hit harder than anything else, not because of what they meant, because of how calmly Marcus said them, like a man stating a fact, not a theory, not a suspicion, a fact. I felt sick, physically sick. The note, the missing file, the surveillance, the cars, the mailbox, the man outside work. Every piece suddenly clicked into place. Someone believed I had something valuable, something dangerous, and they were getting tired of waiting. Marcus finally turned into an abandoned office park. The building stood dark and empty. Rainwater pooled beneath flickering security lights. He parked, killed the engine. Silence filled the car. For several moments, neither of us spoke. Then Marcus reached into the center console and pulled out a folder. My stomach tightened. What is that? He handed it to me. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, license plates, vehicles, dates, times, notes, months of observations, months. I stared at him. You've been tracking this? Marcus nodded. I started after the note. The realization stunned me. While I'd been convincing myself everything was fine, Marcus had been paying attention, collecting evidence, building patterns, preparing. Because unlike me, he knew what happened when warning signs were ignored. Then I saw one photograph that made my blood freeze. A face, clear, sharp, unmistakable. The man outside my building, the man near my house, the man watching. I flipped the photograph over. There was handwriting on the back, a name. And when I read it, every piece of the puzzle suddenly pointed somewhere terrifying. Not toward a random stalker, not toward a stranger, but toward someone connected directly to the fraud investigation. Someone who knew exactly what files Nancy and I were reviewing. Someone who knew exactly why I had become a problem. And someone who had already decided that problems needed to disappear. I looked up, my hand shaking. Marcus met my eyes. Neither of us spoke, because for the first time, we both understood the same thing. This wasn't surveillance anymore.
It was the beginning of a hunt. I didn't sleep that night. Neither did Marcus. We sat inside that empty office park until nearly 3 a.m, surrounded by rain and silence, trying to understand how a lonely widow and a rideshare driver had somehow become part of something dangerous. The folder rested on my lap. The photograph stared back at me. A face I had never seen before. Yet somehow that man had spent months studying my life, my house, my schedule, my habits. The thought made my skin crawl. Marcus finally broke the silence. "We need to go to the police." I nodded immediately, but something inside me hesitated. Not because I didn't trust the police, because I'd spent the last month watching documents disappear, records change, people lie. And every time we uncovered something, someone seemed one step ahead. If money was involved, who could we really trust? The thought lingered as dawn slowly painted the sky gray. By sunrise, we were sitting inside a federal building downtown, not a local police station, a federal building, because before leaving the office park, Nancy had called someone she trusted, someone who specialized in financial crimes, and according to her, the situation had become too large for local authorities, much larger. I remember the agent's office. No decorations, no family photographs, no diplomas displayed on the walls, just files, stacks of them, everywhere. The kind of room built for facts, not feelings. Special Agent Daniel Mercer listened without interrupting for nearly 2 hours. The missing records, the surveillance, the photographs, the mailbox, the settlement accounts, everything. When we finished, he remained silent, his fingers resting on the edge of the desk. Then he opened a drawer, removed a file, and slid it toward us. My stomach tightened. "What is that?" He handed it to me. Inside were photographs, dozens of them, license plates, vehicles, dates, times, notes, months of observations. Months. I stared at him. "You've been tracking this?" Marcus nodded. I started after the note. The realization stunned me. While I'd been convincing myself everything was fine, Marcus had been paying attention, collecting evidence, building patterns, preparing. Because unlike me, he knew what happened when warning signs were ignored. Then I saw one photograph that made my blood freeze. A face, clear, sharp, unmistakable. The man outside my building, the man near my house, the man watching. I flipped the photograph over. There was handwriting on the back, a name. And when I read it, every piece of the puzzle suddenly pointed somewhere terrifying. Not toward a random stalker, not toward a stranger, but toward someone connected directly to the fraud investigation. Someone who knew exactly what files Nancy and I were reviewing. Someone who knew exactly why I had become a problem. And someone who had already decided that problems needed to disappear. It was the beginning of a hunt.
Then Marcus then said 5 words. "We've been looking for him." The room seemed to shrink. "What?" Mercer leaned back, his expression unreadable. His real name isn't Michael Dorsey, the name on Marcus's photograph, an alias, a fake. My pulse quickened. "Who is he?" The agent exhaled. "He's a private investigator." I frowned. That wasn't what I expected. Not criminal, not assassin, not stalker. A private investigator? Mercer continued. "He works for whoever pays him." A pause. But lately, his eyes darkened. "He's been working for people we believe are laundering settlement funds." The air left my lungs. Suddenly, everything connected. The stolen money, the missing files, the surveillance. Someone wasn't trying to hurt me because of who I was. I wasn't the target. I was an obstacle, a witness, a loose thread, and somebody was terrified that thread might unravel everything. For the next 3 weeks, my life disappeared, at least publicly. I didn't go home, didn't return to work, didn't answer calls, didn't use credit cards. Federal investigators arranged temporary housing while they expanded the investigation. Only a handful of people knew where I was: Marcus, Nancy, Agent Mercer, and strangely, those became the only people I trusted. The investigation moved quickly, faster than I expected. Apparently, our files weren't the first warning, just the missing piece, the piece investigators needed to prove the entire operation existed. As more records surfaced, the numbers became staggering. Millions, then tens of millions, hidden through shell companies, fake consulting firms, settlement diversions, account manipulation, years of theft, years. Money stolen from people who could least afford it. Widows, retirees, disabled workers, families already struggling. The kind of theft that doesn't just empty bank accounts, it steals peace, security, dignity. And the deeper investigators dug, the closer they got to the person responsible, the person nobody expected, not even Nancy, not even Agent Mercer, not even me. The answer had been sitting inside our building the entire time, 3 floors above the archive vault, behind a polished office door. The architect of the entire operation wasn't some criminal mastermind hiding overseas. It wasn't a mysterious investor. It wasn't organized crime. It was our company's chief operations officer, Richard Halstad, a respected executive, a community donor, a charity board member, the kind of man people described as trustworthy, the kind of man who shook hands firmly and smiled for cameras, the kind of man who understood exactly how to hide in plain sight. When investigators finally arrested him, every local news station covered it. Employees cried, executives denied knowledge, lawyers issued statements. People were shocked. I wasn't. Not anymore. Because I'd learned something important. The people who do the most damage rarely look dangerous. They look successful. The arrests triggered chaos. Accounts frozen, properties seized, investigations expanded, and one by one, people involved began turning against each other. Everyone wanted a deal. Everyone wanted immunity. Everyone wanted somebody else to take the blame. That's how the final truth emerged. The surveillance, the notes, the photographs, the watcher, all of it had been approved by Halstad himself, not because I had proof, because he thought I might find it. That was enough. To people like him, possibility is often more threatening than reality. The court proceedings lasted almost a year, longer than anyone expected, long enough for seasons to change, long enough for fear to fade into determination, long enough for me to stop feeling like a victim and start feeling like a witness. The first time I saw Halstad in court, he looked smaller, not physically, emotionally, like the weight of exposure had compressed him. He avoided eye contact, avoided cameras, avoided responsibility. Yet every day more evidence surfaced, more records, more testimony, more victims. The truth became impossible to hide. And then something happened I never expected. During one hearing, I looked across the courtroom and noticed Marcus sitting quietly in the back row, suit jacket, tie, nervous expression, completely out of place. I smiled. He smiled back. And for the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel alone. Not really. Months later, the verdict arrived. Guilty. On every major charge. The courtroom remained silent. No cheering, no celebration, just relief. The kind of relief that settles slowly, like finally setting something heavy down you've carried too long.
Afterward, reporters chased stories, television crews interviewed victims, news cycles moved on. Life continues. It always does. But mine wasn't the same. Neither was Marcus's, because somewhere during all those months, something unexpected happened. Two lonely people stopped being strangers, stopped being passengers in each other's lives, and became family. Not through blood, not through obligation, through choice, the strongest kind. About 6 months after the trial ended, I sold my house. Not because I was afraid, because I was ready. The place carried too many ghosts, too many reminders, too much grief. Frank would always be part of me, but grief and loyalty aren't the same thing. He wouldn't have wanted me frozen in place, so I moved. A small town near the coast, quiet streets, ocean air, a porch overlooking water, the kind of place where mornings arrive slowly. The day I moved in, Marcus showed up carrying 2 paper cups. Tea, of course. Some traditions survive everything. We sat on the porch, watching sunlight dance across the waves. Neither of us spoke for a while. The silence felt comfortable, earned. Finally, Marcus laughed softly. "You know what's funny?" "What?" "If you'd never brought me that first cup of tea." I smiled. "I know." He shook his head. "No." His eyes moved towards the ocean. "You really don't." The breeze lifted gently across the porch. Then he said something I'll never forget. "My daughter would have liked you." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The words settled quietly between us. Not painful, not anymore. Just honest, human, healing. A year later, Agent Mercer called. The government had recovered millions of stolen settlement funds. Not all of it, but enough. Hundreds of victims received compensation. People who thought they'd never see justice. People who had almost given up. I remember hanging up the phone and staring out towards the ocean, thinking about how close everything had come. One missing turn, one ignored instinct, one overlooked warning. Sometimes life changes because of something enormous, a tragedy, a diagnosis, a betrayal. But sometimes everything changes because somebody notices, because somebody pays attention, because somebody refuses to look away. The world likes to tell older people they're invisible. I've learned that's not true. People see us. The real question is whether they value what they see. Age isn't weakness. Kindness isn't weakness. Trust isn't weakness. The mistake is believing those things make you powerless. They don't. Sometimes they're exactly what reveal the truth. Every Thursday evening, Marcus still visits. 2 cups of tea, one for him, one for me. We sit on the porch, watch the sun disappear into the horizon, and whenever people ask how we met, they expect some dramatic story, some incredible coincidence, some grand explanation. I usually just smile, because the truth sounds too simple. A lonely widow offered a tired driver a cup of tea, and neither of them realized that small act of kindness would eventually save both of their lives. The waves roll in, the sky darkens, the tea grows cold, and for the first time in many years, the silence no longer feels empty. It feels like peace.